Have you ever wondered why someone can hurt you, betray you, abandon you, and still walk around like nothing happened? Why they can smile in selfies, post cryptic captions, and act as if your absence never left a dent? Let's call it what it is: fake peace. But here's the truth they'll never admit. While they pretend to be fine, your silence is slowly tearing them apart. Not because you begged, not because you exploded, but because you disappeared. It doesn't matter what mask they put on for the world. Deep down, your absence becomes their echo, and that echo never stops. There's a lie so many people believe, especially in relationships. If I don't say something, if I don't react, they'll think I never cared. It's one of the most toxic, disempowering beliefs a person can hold. We're taught to perform our pain, to plead for closure, to explain ourselves into exhaustion, because we think that's strength. But what if everything you've been told is wrong? What if the strongest move isn't action, but silence? What if stoicism isn't about suppressing your emotions, but commanding them and letting your absence speak volumes while your presence retreats into peace? The problem? We live in a world that glorifies reaction. Text back fast, post something subtle, show them you're unbothered but still watching. That's not stoicism, that's theater. That's chaos disguised as control. True peace doesn't broadcast itself. True power doesn't seek attention. It simply exists, grounded, clear, unshakable. That's what this message is about. Not pretending to move on, actually moving on, quietly, fully, permanently. That's the transformation most never complete, because it's done in the dark, not in the spotlight. So what if, instead of begging for closure, you became the closure? What if you stopped reacting and started rebuilding, not out of spite, but out of sacred discipline? Because when you stop giving your energy away, when you become emotionally untouchable, something shifts. You're no longer just gone. You're felt. Your absence becomes the loudest message they'll ever receive, and that message, it shakes them. You're not chasing anymore. You're choosing. In the next part, I'm going to walk you through 6 shifts that flip the entire dynamic. 6 brutally honest moves that don't just create distance, they create gravity. These aren't tricks. These are stoic principles sharpened by heartbreak, powered by presence, and built to make you untouchable. And the deeper we go, the darker it gets for them. Because while they fake peace, they won't be able to ignore the weight of your silence. Trust me, they always feel it. You ready for that shift? Then stay with me, because the part that comes next, it hits harder than any goodbye. 1. Silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. They told you silence was surrender. That if you didn't defend yourself, if you didn't explain your side, if you didn't fight to be understood, then you were giving up. That's the narrative most people inherit, especially in relationships. That silence equals passivity. That stillness means you've lost. But the truth, the kind most don't want to face, is this. Silence is the move that shifts power without noise. It's not the absence of strength, it's the presence of total control. When they hurt you, when they manipulated, gaslit, disappeared, or disrespected your boundaries, they expected something predictable. They expected the emotional storm, the argument, the text messages, the long voice notes laced with heartbreak, hope, confusion. They wanted access to your pain, because as long as you're reacting, they still matter. But when you go silent, not out of spite, not to punish, but because you've chosen yourself, something begins to unravel inside them. Stoicism, in its essence, isn't about indifference. It's about choosing your responses. It's about stepping away from the chaos and realizing your emotional energy isn't up for auction. That your peace is not a shared resource for people who never earned it. Think about it. How many times did they take advantage of your willingness to explain? How often did they wait for your message, knowing you'd fold first? How often did your pain become their proof that they still had access to you? Stoic relationships don't rely on noise. They're built on clarity, and clarity often shows up as silence. When you say nothing, when you do not justify, argue, plead, or explain, you force them to confront themselves, not your voice, not your point of view. Themselves, their choices, their absence. That's the power of disappearing with dignity. Most people think silence is weak because they don't understand the discipline it takes to not respond, to not open the door when your ego is screaming for closure, to not double text when anxiety burns through your chest at 2 a.m., to not post a caption designed to make them wonder. But discipline is exactly what Stoicism teaches. You become dangerous the moment you no longer need to be heard to feel valid. You become unshakable the moment your sense of self is no longer shaped by how someone else sees you. That's the shift. The game they thought they were playing, you left the arena, and now they're confused. Silence isn't the lack of a message, it is the message. The world expects noise, so when you give it none, the effect is jarring. They'll check your socials. They'll ask mutuals if you've said anything. They'll read into the silence because they're not used to being denied emotional access. And when they can't feed off your reaction anymore, the guilt starts to creep in. Not because you told them how they hurt you, but because you didn't. And in that void, they finally hear themselves. Your absence is the silence that turns their fake peace into an unbearable echo. You are not ignoring them, you are transcending them. This is not a tactic to manipulate. This is a declaration of values. A decision that says, I no longer participate in dynamics that drain me. And once you decide that, once you go quiet, not from pain, but from principle, you shift from victim to authority. This is the part people underestimate, because silence is not the end, it's the foundation. It's the stillness before the comeback. It's the pause where you rebuild without distraction. But rebuilding can only begin when you stop leaking energy into people who respond to your pain with indifference. In Stoic relationships, power doesn't come from dominance. It comes from discipline, from emotional sovereignty, from restraint. When they message and get no reply, when they post to provoke and get no reaction, when they wait for the breakdown and it never arrives, that's when they spiral. And their spiral has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with the realization that they've lost access to someone who once gave everything. The silence is louder than any goodbye because it's not a door left ajar. It's a door sealed shut. Not in rage, but in resolution. You don't owe them an explanation. You don't owe them closure. You owe yourself peace. And Stoicism is about peace rooted in clarity, not avoidance. You're not running. You're grounding. That distinction is everything. You're not doing this to win. You're doing this to reclaim. Every moment you stay silent is a moment you reject the need to prove your worth. Every breath you take without responding is a breath you give back to yourself. And in time, that breathing becomes expansion, that silence becomes space, and that space becomes power. Here's what they didn't expect: that you'd grow in your stillness, that you'd evolve in your absence, that you'd become someone who no longer even desires the apology. That's when they feel it, not in your tears, in your indifference, not in your desperation, in your discipline. You are not unavailable. You are reserved for yourself, for people who understand the weight of access, for people who treat your emotions with reverence, not as playgrounds for manipulation. In Stoic relationships, love isn't loud, it's intentional. And detachment doesn't mean you didn't care. It means you finally decided to care about yourself more. When you go silent, you stop feeding the illusion that they can mistreat you and still reach you. You dismantle their comfort, and the quiet becomes thunder, because it reveals what no argument ever could, that your presence was never owed, and now it's gone. This silence is not a tool, it's a mirror. A mirror they didn't want to look into, because it doesn't reflect you, it reflects them. All the lies, all the games, all the missed chances. It confronts them with the simple, unavoidable truth. They lost someone who once chose them fully. And now you choose peace. Real peace. Not the kind they fake for Instagram. The kind that doesn't need to be posted. The kind that is felt in the bones. And that peace, it's addictive. It makes you magnetic in a way that performing never could, because nothing pulls people in like the energy of someone who's no longer performing. That's what Stoicism gives you. That's what silence protects. And every day you remain still, grounded, clear. You become less a memory and more a mystery. Not because you're trying to be, but because they never really saw you. And now, they can't. That's the consequence of fake peace. They lose the one person who was real, so let them underestimate you. Let them pretend they're fine. Because while they perform for the world, you're building yours, quietly, relentlessly. And in time, they'll realize the thing they lost wasn't your attention. It was access to your essence. And that's something no post, no message, no breadcrumb can ever restore. Not when silence has spoken, not when stoicism has rooted itself in your soul, not when you've outgrown the need to explain your absence to those who never honored your presence. 2. Your absence becomes the echo of truth. There's something unsettling about silence, not the kind that calms, but the kind that confronts. The kind that sneaks into rooms where noise used to live, where your voice once echoed, where your presence filled every empty corner. Now that you're gone, now that you've gone quiet, the silence has a pulse, it has a memory, it has weight, and they feel it, not just when they're alone, but especially when they're surrounded by everything they thought would replace you. The parties, the distractions, the fake peace they put on like armor, all of it starts to feel hollow when they realize your absence is louder than your presence ever had to be. This is the moment when stoicism stops being a concept and becomes a living force. Your silence isn't revenge, it's revelation. You're not giving them the silent treatment. You're letting them sit in the consequences of every moment they dismissed you, every time they told you it was in your head. Every time they made you feel like your love was a burden. That silence becomes an echo, bouncing off the walls of their conscience, growing sharper with time. And unlike arguments or explanations, echoes don't fade. They get louder the more someone tries to ignore them. That's the nature of emotional consequence. It doesn't arrive when you demand it. It arrives when you've detached, when you're done. When they finally reach for the thing they thought they'd always have, only to find it missing. Not because it broke, but because it evolved. You didn't disappear, you leveled up. You stopped explaining to people who listened just long enough to manipulate. You stopped offering softness to someone who used your compassion like a doormat. You stopped leaking emotional access to someone who never earned it. And now they're sitting in the void. Not because you punished them, but because you preserved yourself. This is where the echo becomes real. They wake up and check their phone and there's nothing. No missed calls, no unread texts, no stories posted for them to decode, no energy for them to feed off. And that void, it haunts. Because for the first time, they're not reacting to your emotion. They're reacting to their own. That's the power of Stoic relationships. They create space where emotion can no longer be used as leverage. You remove the game board. You remove the rules. You remove yourself. And what's left? The truth. The ugly, unfiltered, inescapable truth that they never thought they'd have to face. The one that says, you lost something real, and now there's no way back. People don't fear losing access. They fear what access represented: comfort, control, ego supply. So when you go silent, it's not just your voice they miss. It's the emotional oxygen they were breathing without even realizing it. Your presence was the safety net under their self-destruction, and now that net is gone. Now the fall is real. This is not cruelty, this is clarity. You are no longer available for manipulation disguised as connection. No longer interested in conversations that end in confusion. No longer playing the role of the emotional caregiver in a dynamic where your needs were secondary. You've removed yourself not to hurt them, but but because you finally decided you were done hurting yourself. That silence becomes the teacher they never thought they needed. Because while they're out there trying to feel better by appearing fine, your absence speaks in ways no caption ever could. It doesn't whisper, it roars. And the roar is deafening because it comes from a place they can't reach. You've become untouchable. Not because you've hardened, but because you've healed. And healing, real healing, creates an energy shift that can't be ignored. That's why the echo begins. Because what they're really haunted by isn't the silence. It's who you've become inside it. Someone they no longer have access to. Someone who no longer reacts. Someone who no longer even needs to be understood. They scroll through old messages. They remember the way you used to check in, follow up, make sure things were okay, and now there's just a void. A black screen, a quiet presence that says more than any argument ever could. I'm gone. Not because you broke me, but because I rebuilt so far from you, there's no way back. That's the power of emotional evolution. It doesn't make announcements. It doesn't come with warnings. It just becomes real. And Stoicism fuels it. Not by making you numb, but by making you powerful enough to choose peace over chaos, stillness over performance, presence over panic. You were never meant to explain your value to someone who treated your loyalty like a convenience. You were never meant to shrink yourself just to be digestible. You were never meant to stay in a room where your love had to compete for validation. So now as you step out, as you stop chasing the why, the how, the closure, they're left alone with everything they didn't appreciate. And that's what starts to crush them. Not your words, your restraint, not your presence, your absence. Because now they're in the echo chamber of their own denial, and your silence becomes the soundtrack. They'll try to mute it with distractions, try to outshine it with noise, but it doesn't fade. Because once you've gone quiet, not to punish, but to evolve, your silence becomes sacred, untouchable, final. They'll wonder if you've moved on. They'll obsess over whether you're thinking of them. They'll check the places they know you used to leave clues and find nothing. That nothing is the echo, that stillness is the lesson, that absence is the justice. And you become the proof that not all exits are loud. Some are powerful because they never announce themselves. Some are transformative because they never look back. That's what Stoic relationships offer. Not performative healing, but actual change. Not temporary detachment, but lasting internal authority. You didn't just disappear from their life. You removed their influence from your mind. And now, they're left wondering how they ever thought they could mistreat someone like you and still keep access. So let them hear the silence. Let them face the echo, because while they were busy faking peace, you were building the kind of presence that no one forgets. And the haunting part? They'll never admit it, but they feel it every time the room goes quiet. They feel it when a song hits different, when a memory shows up uninvited, when they reach for their phone and realize no one's checking anymore. That's what they earned, not vengeance, not a fight, but the echo of everything they never valued. And you keep moving, because the echo isn't your weight to carry, it's theirs. You've already set yourself free. So if this message resonates with you, if you felt that shift, that peace, that quiet fire inside your chest that says, I'm not available for chaos anymore, then like this video, comment number 1 below, and subscribe. You are not their echo. You are the silence that changed everything. 3. You rebuild without an audience. There is something profoundly sacred about rebuilding in silence, about vanishing not into bitterness, but into purpose. They thought your silence was defeat, a sign you were crushed, crumbling, gone. But in truth, your absence was the foundation, being laid beneath your next evolution. That's what they never see coming, the quiet resurrection, the private reassembly of self. They're still performing for validation, still faking peace through filtered stories and rehearsed captions, while you've slipped into a deeper dimension of healing where there is no applause, no witness, no audience, just you and the weight of your own growth. And here's where Stoicism becomes your compass, your anchor. You no longer seek to be seen because you finally understand that visibility doesn't equate to value. Not everyone who watches you claps for you. Not everyone who claps believes in you. And most of all, not everyone who lost you realizes what they lost until you've already rebuilt something so powerful in silence that they can't even recognize the version of you that emerges. You are no longer concerned with being understood by the ones who dismissed you. You are no longer interested in rehashing chapters where your worth was questioned. Your focus has shifted from being accepted to being aligned. And alignment requires separation. It demands solitude. The kind of solitude that hurts at first, that echoes in the bones, that makes you question everything until the noise dies down and all you hear is your own voice, finally clear, finally yours. That's when rebuilding begins. Not with noise, not with declarations, but with choices, subtle, disciplined, sacred choices made day after day in private. You start waking up differently, not in survival mode, but in intention. You don't post to prove. You don't reach out to fill silence. You don't chase ghosts hoping they'll remember what they forgot to appreciate. You invest your energy inward. You stop watering dead plants. You stop lighting torches for people who walked away from the fire. And in that stillness, something remarkable happens. You find clarity in your own reflection. You find strength in still mornings and quiet nights. You find purpose not in proving them wrong, but in proving to yourself that you were never broken, just misplaced in the wrong environments, in the wrong relationships, under the wrong expectations. Stoicism teaches you to let go of attachment to outcomes. It teaches you that your peace isn't a performance, that detachment isn't about indifference, but about not allowing someone else's chaos to govern your direction. While they seek attention, you seek alignment. While they search for the next person to fill the void, you become the person who no longer operates from one. You're not healing to be seen, you're healing to be whole. You're lifting not for likes, but for longevity. You're reading, meditating, working, reflecting, not for external validation, but because your soul demanded a reset. And in doing so, you become your own witness. You no longer need someone to say, "I see you," because you see you. You see the effort, the tears cried behind closed doors, the discipline it takes to not check their page, not read into every silence, not overanalyze every memory. That's strength. It builds something deeper than pride. It builds peace, the kind of peace that can't be disturbed by sudden messages or familiar faces, the kind of peace that isn't dependent on being chosen, but on being clear. And when that clarity becomes your default, your glow changes. Not the kind of glow that begs to be noticed, but the kind that can't be ignored. That's when they feel it. Not when you post a gym pic or write a poetic caption about rising. They feel it in your detachment, in the lack of breadcrumbs, in the space where your energy used to be. Because while they were watching to see if you'd collapse, you were building. Not out of spite, out of sacred discipline. You no longer post for attention. You no longer give updates because your evolution is no longer about them. It's about you. Stoic relationships begin with the one you have with yourself and rebuilding. That relationship means shedding every piece of you that was constructed around someone else's approval. You stop needing someone to come back just to prove you were worthy. You stop rehearsing conversations that were never going to give you the answers you deserved. You stop apologizing for the fact that you care deeply and finally understand that loving deeply was never the problem. Loving recklessly, loving without boundaries, loving people who hadn't earned your loyalty. That was where the bleeding started. And now the wound is healing in silence, under pressure, beneath stillness. There's no announcement, there's no post, there's no need, Because your becoming is internal. It's grounded in truth, not in show. And while they go looking for signs of your return, all they find is distance. You've removed yourself so completely from the narrative that even they begin to doubt the role they played in your life. That's what real detachment does. It rewrites the story not for revenge, but for reclamation. You're no longer a side character in someone else's drama. You're the author now, and the next chapter, it's built in silence, not shared for applause, but for sovereignty. Every gym session, every book finished, every quiet night of reflection, every journal page written, that's your foundation. That's your comeback. Not the one they get to watch unfold in real time, but the one they'll never see coming. The stoicism inside you doesn't need revenge. It doesn't need to prove. It only needs to protect what you've rebuilt. That's why you stay silent. Not because you're afraid of being seen, but because you're no longer afraid of being forgotten. You realize now the only audience that matters is the one within you. The part of you that watched yourself endure the pain, that watched you lower your standards, that watched you wait for breadcrumbs. That same part is now watching you rise, not loudly, not publicly, but powerfully. You're not hiding, you're fortifying, you're not shrinking. You're sharpening, you're not avoiding, you're ascending. This silence is not empty. It is full of every part of you that was once scattered trying to be enough for someone else. And now, gathered in stillness, you are more than enough for yourself. And that is a power no one can touch. So while they post their distractions, while they perform their healing, while they seek replacements, you remain still, unbothered, focused. Stoicism doesn't demand that you shout. It demands that you live with such clarity, such groundedness, that your presence becomes felt even in your absence. And when you finally re-emerge, when you finally walk into rooms with the energy of someone who has nothing to prove, you won't need to explain where you've been. Your aura will say it louder than words ever could. I've been rebuilding, alone, on purpose, without the need to be seen. For they always come back, but it's too late. There's a strange silence that follows after someone leaves thinking they've won, when they think walking away makes them stronger, more in control, more desired. In their mind, they believe that distance equals dominance, that if they cut off faster, respond slower, or go colder, they'll hold the upper hand. And maybe at first it even looks like that's working. They seem unbothered, they seem confident, they seem happy. But what they forget, what they always forget, is that the absence they created becomes a space where you stop waiting, where you stop chasing, where you stop needing. And that shift, the one they never feel in real time, is what makes them eventually circle back. Because while they thought they were ending something, they were really starting your awakening. They didn't realize that silence would teach you more than their words ever could. They didn't anticipate that in the space they left behind, you would no longer echo their name. You would become your own voice. And when that happens, when you no longer orbit them, they feel it, not right away, but inevitably it always comes. Because people don't miss you when you're still available. They miss you when the door is sealed, when the access is gone, when the person who once checked in, once cared, once fought, no longer shows up. And it's not your absence that hurts them. It's what your absence represents, that you've changed, that you've outgrown the dynamic they took for granted, that you're no longer playing the role they cast you in. The irony is brutal. They always return when you no longer want them to, when you've rebuilt, when you've realigned, when the version of you they knew is dead and buried beneath a stronger, colder, quieter version who doesn't need the past to validate her future. That's when they start to crawl back. A like on your story, a random "how have you been?", a comment on an old memory. Don't be fooled. It's not love. It's not remorse. It's not even clarity. It's curiosity, guilt, ego. It's them wondering if the door they slammed shut is still open just enough for them to creep through. But here's the truth that Stoicism teaches with sharp clarity. Not every return deserves a welcome. Not every Apology deserves a response. Not every door that opens should be walked through. Your silence wasn't a pause, it was a boundary. It was the line in the sand that said, I no longer bleed in places that never bandaged me. When they return, what they don't realize is they're talking to a ghost, someone who used to need them, who used to bend, who used to hope. But that person no longer exists. What remains is someone who understands her own power, who protects her peace, who no longer answers to the emotional habits of someone else. And that's what breaks them, not your anger, your indifference, not your tears, your emotional detachment. Because they expected a show. They expected begging. They expected a version of you that would still respond. But instead, they find silence. Not cold, not cruel, just complete, just closed. And that's the moment it hits, that they underestimated the silence, that while they performed peace, you created it, that while they played games, you built presence, that while they chased the next distraction, you became the thing they'll never find again. Stoic relationships aren't built on who can react louder, they're built on who can stay still, grounded, unaffected. And in that stillness, in that refusal to re-engage with what wounded you, you rise. That's what they didn't expect, that you would rise without revenge, that your glow-up wouldn't need their attention, that your peace would be permanent, not performative. And when they come back, and they always come back, they're not coming for love, they're coming for access. Access to your energy, to your presence, to your emotional generosity. But you no longer give that away to people who once treated it like an afterthought. Now you give it to yourself. You pour into your own well. And when your silence meets their return, it delivers a message louder than any closure. The door is closed, not locked in anger, but sealed in growth. That's when they spiral, because they remember not the fights, but the comfort, not the ending, but the loyalty you gave despite how they showed up. And no one replaces that. No one replicates what was real. They'll try, they'll project, they'll tell themselves stories to reduce the discomfort. But deep down, no, you were the one who didn't just give them love. You gave them safety, and they traded it for control, for ego, for pride. That's a loss that haunts. And you keep moving. You don't post for attention, you don't reply for validation, you don't perform for closure, because Stoicism has taught you that real strength doesn't chase, it chooses. Real healing doesn't explain, it evolves. Real peace doesn't need to be seen, it simply is. And in that energy, you become something different, something rare, something unforgettable. The silence that once felt heavy becomes your protection. The detachment that once felt like grief becomes your power. The absence that once felt like loss becomes the path to your higher self. That's the full circle moment, when their return no longer tempts you, when the same person who once shook your world no longer gets a reaction, when the thought of letting them back in feels more disruptive than healing. That's when you know the process worked, that the silence did its job, that the rebuilding wasn't for show but for sovereignty. So yes, they come back, they always do. But by then, the version of you who once waited is no longer waiting. She's walking, and the most powerful part of all, she doesn't look over her shoulder. Because what she's building now, alone, on purpose, without performance, is worth more than anything she left behind. If you're feeling that shift, that strength, that clarity deep in your bones, then this is your moment. Go ahead, like this video, comment number 1 to claim your growth, and subscribe so you never forget what you're capable of. Let's keep rising together, without noise, without begging, without looking back. 5. Emotional detachment is magnetic. Most people think attraction is built through visibility, posting, hinting, reacting, showing just enough emotion to seem mysterious but still present. They believe that staying emotionally nearby, even after separation, keeps the thread alive. So they linger, watching stories, liking posts, dropping cryptic captions. But what they don't realize is that presence without peace isn't power, it's performance. Stoicism teaches the exact opposite, that real power, real gravity is born not through noise, but through complete emotional detachment. And that detachment doesn't mean you never cared. It means you no longer abandon yourself to prove that you did. Emotional detachment is not indifference. It's the evolution from emotional dependence. It's the point where your thoughts no longer orbit their approval, where their silence no longer stirs anxiety, where your days are no longer shaped by the weight of their absence. And what's astonishing is this: the moment you stop needing someone to see your worth becomes undeniable. Not just to them, but to everyone around you. There's something magnetic about a woman who doesn't chase, who doesn't flinch, who doesn't react, not because she's cold, but because she's centered, because she has learned through pain that her peace is not a performance and her love is not a transaction. The world teaches you to stay visible, to stay relevant, to drop subtle cues that say, "I'm still here if you change your mind." But Stoic relationships don't leave the door half open. They close it gently but completely. And in that closure, something rare happens. You begin to expand. You stop bending to be seen. You stop shrinking to be chosen. You stop curating your presence to manipulate perception. Instead, you return home to yourself, to your values, to your emotional clarity. You wake up no longer waiting for a message. You stop reading into digital crumbs. You stop giving your energy to interactions that only leave you emptier. And the more you pull inward, the more powerful your energy becomes, because detachment does not disconnect you from love. It disconnects you from illusion, from the fantasy that they'll change, from the hope that they'll finally realize your worth, from the fear that being quiet makes you forgettable. When you fully detach, something extraordinary happens. Your life stops revolving around what left, and instead it starts evolving around what stayed, yourself. Your standards rise, your boundaries tighten, your circle gets smaller, but your vision expands. You no longer chase connection, you embody it. You no longer perform for validation, you radiate it, and people feel it, not because you told them to, but because energy never lies. That's what makes emotional detachment so magnetic. It carries the mystery of a woman who has nothing to prove and everything to protect. A woman who does not beg for presence. A woman who does not collapse in absence. A woman who has rewritten her identity not through reaction, but through stillness. And the ones who thought they could come and go as they pleased, they feel it most because they sense it energetically. They sense that they're no longer a factor. They sense the thread is cut. They sense they've lost access, not to your body or your inbox or your time, but to your emotional availability. And that is what truly haunts them. Because emotional availability is the lifeline manipulators use to survive. They don't miss your texts. They miss the control they had over how you felt. They miss being able to influence your day with a simple message. But now, their words are met with silence. Their likes are met with indifference. Their attempts are met with a boundary they never expected to be enforced. And that's when the shift becomes permanent. You've taught your nervous system that their presence is not a requirement for your peace. You've taught your mind that their patterns are not your responsibility. You've taught your heart that love without respect is not worth keeping. And from that inner mastery, a new version of you emerges, one that does not negotiate with chaos, one that does not tolerate ambiguity, one that does not need closure to close the chapter. Because Stoicism teaches that detachment is not the rejection of love, it is the rejection of suffering masquerading as love. It is the realization that what you were holding on to wasn't real love. It was emotional dependency. And once you break that, you no longer grieve the person, you grieve the illusion. But even that grief transforms. It becomes fuel. It becomes focus. It becomes a fire that no longer burns you but warms you. You channel it into yourself, into your work, into your goals. You stop proving. You start becoming. And the irony is, the less you care about being seen, the more seen you become. Not because you return to the stage, but because your absence spoke louder than any presence ever could. Emotional detachment creates polarity, it creates curiosity, it creates space where others are forced to face themselves. Because they no longer get to bounce off your reaction. They no longer get to control the tempo of the connection. You've taken back the rhythm. And now they dance to the beat of their own consequences. Meanwhile, you move differently. You rest deeper. You speak less. You observe more. You trust yourself. You stop explaining. You stop chasing. You stop auditioning. Because the stage they tried to keep you performing on no longer exists. You burned it down when you chose silence. You buried it when you refused to explain your worth again. You walked away, not with a scream, but with a sentence only you needed. To hear, "I'm done abandoning myself." And that, right there, is when your energy changed. Not because someone told you to move on, but because you felt it in your soul, that every time you responded, you were delaying your own peace. Every time you reacted, you were leaking your own power. Every time you waited, you were betraying your own progress. Now you've replaced waiting with building. You've replaced hoping with healing. You've replaced proving with protecting. And the people who once had easy access to your softness, they're left with silence. Not angry silence, sacred silence. Because Stoicism is sacred. It doesn't numb you. It reclaims you. It doesn't close your heart. It sharpens your vision. And now you see everything clearly. You see who they really were. You see what you really deserve. You see where your energy belongs. And with that vision, you move, not backwards, not in circles, but forward, quietly, confidently, unapologetically, because now you know emotional detachment doesn't push love away. It pushes illusion away. And what remains is a life you no longer have to beg to be chosen in, a life you've chosen yourself. And nothing, no text, no glance, no ghost from the past can pull you back into the chaos you escaped. Because the peace you've built is not fragile, it's forged. And the version of you who lives in that peace, she is untouchable. 6. You choose you, and that changes everything. It always comes down to a single decision, the one that feels quiet at first, but reshapes your entire reality. The decision to stop waiting, to stop hoping, to stop sacrificing yourself for the chance that someone might finally see your worth. This is the moment everything changes. When you finally stop scanning your phone for their name, stop wondering if today will be the day they get it. Stop bargaining with your own needs just to hold on to their attention for a few more days. The second you choose yourself, the entire energy shifts. Not because you're angry, not because you've given up, but because you've come home to something deeper, something unshakable, the truth that no one will ever prioritize you properly. If you don't first do it yourself, this is what Stoicism instills, not the absence of feeling, but the presence of clarity. The clarity that your peace is not a product of their return, their apology, or their recognition. Your peace is born the moment you stop trying to be understood by someone committed to misunderstanding you. You stop explaining, you stop chasing, you stop rewriting your needs to fit into someone else's narrative. And when that happens, when you choose you, your world doesn't collapse, it expands. You start seeing life through a different lens. A lens not tainted by confusion or chaos, but sharpened by stillness and self-respect. You make better decisions. You attract different energy. You stop betraying yourself just to feel temporarily loved. Because now you understand that love built on self-betrayal isn't love at all. It's survival, and survival is not enough. You deserve more than to merely be tolerated, responded to, breadcrumbed into believing you still matter. You deserve to be met, held, chosen in full. But that only happens when you start choosing yourself in full. That's the real transformation, not the glow-up they can see, but the one they can't access. The internal one, the stoic one, the one where you no longer internalize rejection as a reflection of your worth, but as a redirection to your power. Choosing yourself means you stop apologizing for having needs. You stop shrinking to be less intense, less emotional, less too much. You realize that the people who ask you to be less are not your people. They are mirrors of your past wounds, not your future peace. And so you leave, not in rage, but in reverence. Reverence for your time, reverence for your energy, reverence for the life you're now creating without asking for anyone's permission to live it. Choosing yourself doesn't mean you hate them. It means you love you. It means you no longer hand over your softness to people who weaponize it. It means you don't keep proving you're worthy to someone who treats love like it's conditional. It means you stop being afraid of being alone, because you've realized the most terrifying thing is being surrounded by people who make you feel lonelier than solitude ever could. When you choose you, you stop running from yourself. You sit with the hard truths. You admit what you tolerated. You acknowledge the patterns, and you break them, not with blame, but with brutal honesty. Because the truth is, it wasn't just about what they did. It was also about what you allowed. And now, in choosing yourself, you reclaim your standards. You raise your frequency. You stop being emotionally accessible to people who only show up when it's convenient. That choice makes you powerful. Not loud, powerful, not reactive, resolute. And it's that power that shakes them more than anything else. Because when they circle back, they're met not with bitterness, but with boundaries. They're met not with the version of you who begged, but with the version of you who is no longer available for negotiation. That's what happens when you choose you. You go from being someone they took for granted to someone they can't touch again. And that untouchability, it's not coldness, it's clarity. Clarity that your value never depended on their consistency. That your identity was never meant to be built on someone else's recognition. You were always enough, they just weren't equipped to receive you. And that's not your burden to carry anymore. Now you're building differently. You're not building to prove a point. You're not chasing a glow-up for attention. You're constructing a life that's rooted, honest, sacred. A life where your emotions are respected, not used. Where your effort is matched, not manipulated. Where your love is reciprocal, not one-sided. And for the first time, you're not afraid of losing people who never saw you. You're afraid of losing yourself again. So you guard your peace, not with walls, with wisdom, with discernment, with the quiet knowing that not everyone deserves access just because they miss the comfort of your chaos. Some people miss you for the wrong reasons, and now you see through that. You no longer ask, why did they leave? You ask, why did I stay? You no longer replay the pain, you replay the lesson. That's stoic relationships in practice, not clinging to emotion, but elevating through it. Not rejecting connection, but redefining it through the lens of self-worth. And with every day that passes, you choose yourself again, even when it's lonely, even when it hurts, even when the old you whispers, maybe just reach out one more time. You stay grounded. You stay silent. You stay sovereign, because your growth isn't about proving you've moved on. It's about building a life so aligned that looking back would cost too much. And that alignment, it changes everything. Your energy becomes cleaner, your focus becomes sharper, your boundaries become effortless. You stop negotiating with ghosts. You stop entertaining maybes. You stop shrinking to be loved, because you are no longer in the business of convincing people to care. You care, and that's enough. So if you've felt this shift, if you're done with half love and almost effort, if you've made that quiet yet life-altering decision to choose yourself, then honor it, protect it. Let it keep shaping you into the version of yourself you've always deserved to be, the one who's done breaking to be understood, the one who's done over-explaining their value, the one who walks with peace, not performance, If you've made it this far, you know what this is. It's not just a story, it's your reflection, it's the blueprint to your freedom. If it hit deep, if it reminded you of what you're building, go ahead and like this video, comment number 1 and subscribe. Because we're just getting started, and the silence you're walking in now, that's the sound of your real life beginning. Let them think they've won. Let them smile in stories, perform strength, flaunt detachment. You don't need to correct the narrative, because the truth has a way of echoing louder than any lie ever could. And your silence, it's not just an absence, it's a presence, one they didn't expect, one they can't control, one they can't erase. They'll scroll through the same spaces they once used to reach you and find them empty. They'll search for the same version of you they used to manipulate and realize she's gone. The woman who waited, who explained, who bent herself to be enough, she doesn't live here anymore. She's been replaced by someone who doesn't perform pain, who doesn't negotiate her worth, who doesn't chase peace in the hearts of people who only offered chaos. That's what Stoicism has given you, not numbness but command, not suppression but clarity. Not a mask, but a mirror that now reflects back only truth. And in that truth, you rise. You've become someone who doesn't ask, what if they come back? You ask, do I ever want to go back to the version of myself that tolerated that? That shift is everything. That shift means you're no longer living for potential. You're living in reality. You're not waiting for apologies. You've already accepted the lesson. You're not wondering if they miss you. You've already reclaimed the parts of you that missed yourself. You are no longer shaped by the silence. You are sculpted by what you built inside it. This isn't revenge. This isn't bitterness. This is alignment. This is power. This is peace that doesn't scream to be seen. It simply is. The story they remember, that's theirs to hold. The life you're creating, that's yours to live. They'll fake peace. But your absence will eat at them, not because you forced it, but because they never imagined you'd truly be gone. And now you are, not lost, not broken, but found, in every step away from what wasn't meant for you, and every step into the self you were always becoming. Quiet, grounded, unshakable, and free.